每位師傅都會各有長短嘅，好正常嘅。
咁葉師傅你呢？
所以你都要幫手佢。
我哋做嘅一切唔係為咗眼前，係為將來。
Drums from the battlefield singing never retreats. When the villain of the outcast standing is so unique. The only thing separating is wisdom and technique. On the battlefield running with the enemy's land. Master of the mantra with the word of my hands. Wolves and get left with the sheep. Battle with the wolves and get left with the sheep. Try to battle with the wolves and got left with the sheep. You wanna battle with the wolves and get left with the sheep.
Hey everybody. So this week's film that we wound up with is called Ip Man 3. It is the third film. I have not seen the others, but I was under the impression that they didn't really combine very much, and it turns out they don't. So Ip Man 3 is part of a trilogy. This is regarding the master of the kung fu style of Wang Chun. So there are those there's two other films. I'm to understand those are unrelated to the official series of the trilogy, so that's why I'm referring to it as a trilogy, even though there's technically 5 Ip Man movies. Now, the fighting style represented in this film is the original fighting style that Bruce Lee was taught, and the story of the trilogy itself is partially a true story. I understand the first two are a little more accurate. The character of Ip Man is very much a real person, and the film trilogy itself does an interesting job of combining fact and fiction. Ip Man is played by Donnie Yen in all of the films. And the character or the person did actually teach Wang Chun, and he reached the point of becoming a Grandmaster, and did actually teach Bruce Lee as well. However, apparently the only thing in this film that is actually factual is this side dramatic story of Ip Man's wife growing sick with cancer and him dealing with that. And there's also a scene with Bruce Lee teaching Ip Man how to dance in exchange for being accepted as a disciple to his school. And Bruce Lee also makes one other appearance, as you saw in the trailer. I felt like even the trailer made it a little confusing of what the film is, but Bruce Lee makes an appearance in the film, and you pretty much saw it in the trailer. He fights trying to show off his skills to try and get accepted as a disciple, and in that moment he believes he doesn't. It doesn't really go anywhere with that particular scene. It more feels like a way to just introduce Bruce Lee's character to the story. Now, for this film, it got a little confusing at times. But as I said before, it seems like the only thing factual in this particular film was Ip Man's wife's sickness and Bruce Lee existing. And despite it being part of what never happened, my favorite scene that I'm going to end up showing you guys in a second is actually a scene that involves one of the plot lines, and there's a couple, one of the plot lines in this film, which involves Mike Tyson's character. And I need to talk about this character because I just can't. Like, so Mike Tyson, first of all, attempts to speak Cantonese multiple points in the scene. And it still looks ridiculous. And I have not yet actually confirmed if he's the one speaking it or if it was dubbed over every time. Because some scenes you look at it and it very clearly looks like someone dubbed over his voice. But then there's other times which includes the scene I'm going to show you, where you almost could believe he's saying it, but it still just seems ridiculous. His character Frank is one of the antagonists of one of the plot lines in this movie. He's supposedly the main antagonist, although I feel like we don't see him enough. But at the same time, the trailer you just saw made it seem like some completely other guy was the main antagonist, and he just makes an appearance, which is kind of what happens. But his storyline is the first one we're introduced to. He is a real estate mogul who is a boxer who uses a gang of kung fu trained thugs trying to bully and assault and damage their way into owning a local school. And they go so far as to kidnap a group of children, including Ip Man's child, and threaten to sell them into slavery. It escalates really high for something that's abandoned halfway through the movie. But after that particular incident, Ip Man says that he's basically going to take the fight directly to Mike Tyson's character. And Mike Tyson pretty much just simply says, well, if you can survive in a fight for 3 minutes with me, then I'll drop it and it'll be over. So the best scene that I'm going to show you right now is actually that scene. So we're going to...
So you're Ip Man? So you're the best fighter in China?
Yao Yi Si.
Okay, let's deal. Seems to me that your Wing Chun fist is the fastest.
Wi-Fi back palm.
Let's see whose fists are the fastest. Yours or mine?
Chan Fan Jong.
If you laugh, by then,
Or Feng Gole.
So yeah, it's an interesting scene. And the reason I picked that, because it doesn't look like the greatest scene, I think we can all admit to that. And I'm first off going to actually apologize, because I know that that scene had no subtitles. I could not find a clip that had the subtitles. So I apologize that you couldn't understand the Cantonese that he was saying, but essentially he was kind of repeating what he was then saying in English. So you didn't miss much with that. And the reason I picked that for the best scene, even though it doesn't look like that really was best scene worthy, especially when you watch my next scene I picked to show you my favorite character. But the reason I picked this was I felt like they did a great job in showing this drastic contrast between the fighting style of American boxing versus this classic kung fu style of Wang Chun. Now, obviously, Ip Man in reality never fought some heavyweight boxer bad guy. But it does make for a cool visual. And, even though it's not the greatest storyline, it's not like the most realistic, it did make for a good kung fu movie. And that scene also, I feel like, did a pretty good job in that most of the fights in this film, you will notice, Ip Man stays very calm. He has a very focused, meditative look on his face. But I feel like in that scene, there was a couple times where he seemed slightly flustered, or like he was having to work harder to plan things out. And I feel like that was kind of realistic in the sense that somebody who has spent his whole life studying kung fu and fighting with other kung fu styles and interacting with pretty much only kung fu versions of fighting, he probably doesn't have a whole lot of exposure to American boxing. So the idea that he might struggle a little bit with this fight seems a lot more realistic than just letting him kick ass, because that's not something he's used to. He's not used to the mechanics and the footwork and like the style of that move, and he's still better than it, but it's something new to him and he has to work harder with that. And I thought that that was really well done. Now, however, like Mike Tyson's that whole thing and that scene actually, even though it's my best scene, it brings up one of my main issues with the film. The plotline of this movie is not very well formed. It's the main point of action for like the first half of this movie is this storyline. Mike Tyson's character working with the white commissioner of police, basically owning the city and trying to get real estate all over, get money, whatever, be evil, evil foreign devils. But after this one scene, the whole scene lasts 5 minutes. The fight lasts 3 minutes. I cut it way short because all these scenes are really long, especially the fight scenes. It's a kung fu movie. But literally, you have this 3-minute fight, a 5-minute interaction between our main character and like the main bad guy. And then he just sticks to his word, and it drops. That whole storyline drops halfway through the film. Like, not even the whole way through the film, like midpoint through the film, that plotline is thrown away. And it seemed dumb, this idea that, like, if Ip Man, especially it pissed me off, because I'm like, this idea that Ip Man could have just, like, gone and fought him, like, several scenes ago, and then you wouldn't have had the village have, like, the town have their only school be burnt to ashes and have like a bunch of their expensive school shit burned up, or have dozens of children traumatized because they were terrified of being sold into slavery. Like, none of that would have happened if he just had gone and fight Mike Tyson in the first place. And that can be said for a lot of movies, but this especially was like, most of those movies you're like, yeah, but after he fights him and everything, he doesn't stick to his word. He escalates things. It gets worse. It gets more actiony. And that doesn't happen here. Mike Tyson literally is just like, oh, okay, I lost. Well, fuck it. Let's go buy up some other reels. Like, that whole thing was just abandoned. And then you're like, what the fuck? Like, where did that whole storyline go? They just ended it halfway through. But so because of that end, we do end up with the second antagonist of the film, who you, because of the trailer, that's who you think is the only / main antagonist of this movie, by the way. That's how that's how poorly configured the plot lines are, was that even the trailer gives you this completely different idea of what the point of the story is and who our main focuses are in terms of character. But so this character is our second antagonist. He is another master of Wang Chun who believes himself to be the true master of the style. And this character is actually my pick for favorite character. While I don't know if his storyline is true, because I found nothing online to confirm or deny the existence of this person or what happened in this movie. But compared to the other plot line, this was far more realistic, and I felt like this was far more suiting for a kung fu movie based on somebody who actually existed. Now, obviously, as far as kung fu movies go, plenty of kung fu movies do the whole ridiculous storylines and excessive fighting scenes and super hyped up bad guys who usually tend to be foreigners. But like this, because the main character really existed, because this is a real person, I feel like the plotline needed to be more realistic. I know it's not a documentary. This was purely an entertainment film, but then you threw in this secondary plotline that was a good plotline story for this guy, and it was put on the back burner as this like second storyline compared to that real estate bullshit. And again, I don't know if this is true, but it seems like it could be. And while this character isn't very complex, because again, it's a typical fighting kind of, martial arts story, competing students, and one is determined to prove he's better and take the fame and the title that he believes to rightfully be his. And I feel like I'm talking about like half of the fighting animes that exist, because there's always that character. But the difference is this isn't some like washed out student who sucked and had to learn a better version or had to struggle to like be better or anything like that. This was one who they were both pretty much on par as fighters, but his feelings are that it's not just that he thinks he's a better fighter, but he believes that he is the one who's fighting the traditional form of the fighting style. He doesn't feel that Ip Man's style is actually Wang Chun, and he calls him out on it publicly. And you go through this really like fast, and it's so fast, like you can't even read the subtitles to the Cantonese headlines for the newspapers they're showing. But you go through this super fast montage of this guy going from a rickshaw puller to fighting his way through all the different masters that hang out at this like master of karate, of kung fu restaurant that exists apparently. And apparently all the fights, by the way, have to take place at the restaurant. Like this place better have good insurance because half their shit's broken over the course of a couple different days. And it's just this super quick, like passed through montage that seemed really rushed. And I felt bad because the character was a good character. He had a good, like, you look at him and it's like, he has a really good setup. Like, he was this rickshaw puller. He worked his way up to owning a school, and now he's trying to build the reputation that you need to have that kind of school succeed. And by doing that, he's taking on our main character, who's most known for being this incredible person at this particular style. His motivation is not fame, it's recognition and respect, which is a lot different, obviously. And you don't hate him. He's an antagonist, but you can't hate him for what he wants because you can respect him for it. And you can respect that he like wants his son to be proud of him too with it. And throughout the film, he's this like mixture of good guy and bad guy because he also helps with saving the kids, and you don't really know what to think of him. And then suddenly he's this main antagonist who's the opposition of our main character. And so his scene I chose for you guys, I'm going off on a rant. Sorry. I like this character. But the scene I chose for him also very well could have been best scene and probably should have been best scene, but I wanted to save it for favorite character. It's a very beautifully choreographed scene, and I had to do a small clip because once again, it's a very long scene. But what I chopped out for you guys is extremely well shot. It's well produced. All aspects of it on a cinematography scale makes it extremely well done. Like it's super professional. The lighting is amazing. There's a moment in it that you'll recognize immediately where the lighting, they set it up with the shot perfectly and just did this beautiful piece with it. It's amazing. And I'm really excited for you guys to see it. Again, I kind of wish I had made it my best scene, but I really wanted to save it for this guy. So yeah, like I said, it's, it's a very well done scene. I'm sure you obviously noticed the lighting that I was referring to. And this scene very much was, again, it illustrated what a kung fu movie does. The very well timed slow motion, that choreographed dancing feel of the fight. It pulled in that like even though again the main character really exists, kung fu movies seem to rely very much on this like feeling more than like an actual concept of it for some, but a feeling of mysticism is always there. That beautiful grace and fluidity of kung fu always is exaggerated, but in a very good way. I'm not a huge fan of kung fu movies, but that is an aspect of them that I do really like, and I appreciate that they take the time to, even when it's overdone in like the ridiculous kung fu movies, like Shaolin Soccer, for example, like things like that are like those kind of mocking kung fu movies. Um, Even in those, they still do it kind of well. Even when it's overly exaggerated, you have to appreciate that they understand timing with it very well. Um, but again, this scene still relates to my biggest issue with the film, and it's the randomness of these vastly different like plots. And I do love Donnie Yen playing in Kung